Arcane, produced by Riot Games, released in November of 2021, and it earned itself the title of highest rated Netflix show on IMDb with a 9.3 out of 10. Today, I hope to break down the show's title sequence and dive into the tactics used to portray to the viewer some of the concepts in the show. The title sequence is stylized with the characters represented in sculpted rock, often with bits and pieces of the rock flying and moving around depending on the scene. This will be important to pay attention to as we examine the sequence in more detail, as it heavily aids in the prevalence of many of the strategies that will be mentioned in this video. The first thing I would like to touch on is the use of clothing and the setting sharp or messy environment to represent class and hierarchy. The most obvious use of this is when the character Mel is depicted. Her stature, clothes, and the clean, sharp angles of her environment very clearly give the impression of the authority and wealth that she holds. Contrast this to when we first see Vi and Jinx. Their clothes are very ragged and baggy, representing their lower status. Lastly, our first depiction of the character Caitlyn shows her carved under an archway. Generally, archways are symbols of wealth or progression for a city. Alongside her holding a rifle, we perceive Caitlyn as someone with authority and power. However, later in the sequence, we see her firing the gun as rock fragments and bullets scatter throughout the scene. This more messy view of Caitlyn contrasts to our first look at her and represents that she holds some middle ground between order and disruption. Moreover, camera angles play a role in showing us power. The end of the sequence shows us a different look at Vi and Jinx, representing them in some sort of fight, clearly communicated by their positions and emphasized by the opposite colors. Illumination comes from the center of the two characters, showing no real favor to either of them. However, as the camera pans around, we see Vi represented from the upper perspective. This angle subconsciously gives us a feel of power or strength that Vi has over Jinx. Next, I would like to dive into the use of rhythm, cuts, and camera movement. These are the things that really drive the title sequence. The rhythm is very connected to the way that the story is told. Following along to a modified version of the Imagine Dragons enemy, the start of the sequence is slow and methodical. This gives us a feel of the deep and intricate history that the cities and characters in the show have. As the song develops and picks up in pace, we see the cuts and camera movement begin to follow. Furthermore, pieces of the rock fragments mentioned earlier allow for a more chaotic feel to the scenes. This more snappy and eager motion energizes the audience and gets them ready for the action and intensity that the show has to offer. The first character shown as the rhythm transitions is a masked character that we later know in the show as a firelight. The camera swiftly zooms out and shows us the firelight as they glide away from what seems to be an illuminated explosion. This depicts to the viewer that the character brings some sort of mayhem and speed to the show. Building off of that, the creators used illumination and shadows in a very clever way in tandem with the sculpted rock style to give the viewer a quick look into the mystery and fear of certain characters. We see the illumination of Vi and Jinx in the hands of their guardian. Sharp zooms take us out, and we see the reveal of a large character in the shadows behind them. This scene gives us a clear view of the battle between these characters and the possible power that the man in the shadows may hold. As he looks up, the others disappear into a dark mist and his eye glows red. The use of the shadow and color here is able to represent to the audience the feeling of evilness and fear that this character will bring.